Welcome to another Wisdom podcast today with Anthony Behar. He is basically the head honcho at Major Properties, executive vice president and partner. He's also a podcaster, landlord, and top CRE influencer on LinkedIn. So glad to have him on today. He is live from Los Angeles, California. Hope that it's sunny there, just like it's sunny here in Mexico. This
It's beautiful.
podcast, yeah, it is. Glad to hear. I actually moved away from Canada because there wasn't enough sun. That was one of my odd reasons. So vitamin D. This podcast is brought to you by podfire.com. If you want to start, scale, be invited to podcasts like this one, find sponsors. Podcasts are pretty cool. You can meet cool people like Anthony, network with them. Also grow your network because you can get leads out of a podcast and clients. So if you have a nice back end with newsletter, with remarketing, with posts, podcast can be a nice front end, right? The first conversation with people. So podfire.com for that. Anthony, welcome to the pod. Can you tell us a bit more about yourself and about your businesses?
Yeah, well, first, I just want to say thank you, Charles, for inviting me on the podcast. I love to be a guest on podcasts. I had my own podcast and took a little hiatus during the pandemic, and then I got overwhelmed with work. And so I'm looking to bring it back. And that was called Behar on the Block, based in Los Angeles. So I love what you're doing and appreciate the opportunity to speak to your audience today. So let's see, where should we start? A little bit about me. So my business is commercial real estate brokerage. Simply put, I represent mostly landlords, property owners of commercial and industrial property in the greater Los Angeles area. Other clients include investors and developers, and I help put together and structure commercial real estate deals. Our firm is, we're going to be 60 years old coming in January, and I've been with them for 21 years. We're based in downtown Los Angeles. We're a boutique firm. We're very nimble. We run a very tight operation, and we have an incredible reputation and expertise and knowledge of the Los Angeles commercial real estate market. So that's where the bread and butter of our business is. And, we can get into details and things like that. But that's where I spend most of my time, is in commercial real estate deals and working with investors, developers, and landlords.
Right. And we're seeing a massive shift in the market right now. Are you converting commercial into residential as people are not wanting anymore as they would to work outside of the house?
Right. So that's a really, really hot topic, and especially here in Los Angeles and in the downtown Los Angeles area specifically, the office market has gotten completely decimated. And it's totally disrupted now. There are a couple pockets of Los Angeles where the office market is still very strong. But in terms of converting office buildings to residential, it's a good idea. And there are a couple companies, and one in particular is Jameson. They own a lot of real estate in Koreatown, and they are doing it. And the reason they're able to do it is they bought these buildings 30, 40 years ago. They have an incredibly low basis, and most of the buildings are deemed C-class office buildings where have just become completely obsolete. And the floors aren't very deep. The building heights aren't 40 or 50 stories. So they're able to do it. Now, when you're talking about converting a Class A tower into residential, nobody has done it yet. And it's very complicated. The floor plates are way different than you would be for an apartment building, for example. The upgrades are incredibly expensive. The infrastructure is just completely different. So no, we're not seeing a lot of Class A towers being converted to residential. It's very expensive. It's very complicated. And only some very few buildings are starting to do it. I don't know if we're going to see more, but I think there'll be maybe other uses for those obsolete or empty Class A office buildings. One use in particular might be turning them into data centers. And that is something that we're kind of starting to look at now, because obviously with the use of AI technology, even things like this, we're doing the use of data, and the amount of data that's being put out into the marketplace is nothing like it was, say, even 10 years ago, for example. So there's a tremendous need for that. There will be other uses for those office buildings. Some might be completely demoed and just start all over, depending on location, land, etc. Maybe it might be turned into medical as a possibility. The demand for healthcare is exponentially increasing as our population is aging tremendously over the next 10, 20 years. So we're going to see other uses about that. But simply put, I don't think it's a simple answer going from office to residential. There's a lot in between there.
Okay. And how complicated is it to convert a commercial building into a residential one?
Well, it depends on the commercial building we're talking about. Like I said, if it's maybe a 3-story old office building and the floor plates aren't super deep, then it might be a little easier. But again, if you look at a Class A building, the floor plates are just completely different than they would be for an apartment building. So in that sense, it's difficult. But our firm was actually one of the first to do a deal that's called adaptive reuse. So if you look at, there's a lot of old industrial, multi-story industrial buildings in downtown Los Angeles, and they used to be old sweatshops and sewing factories and things like that. Well, that whole use really is gone and has changed. And so what happened was you had a lot of old multi-story industrial buildings that had low ceilings, that had tighter hallways and corridors. And we were able to sell these buildings to a developer here in Los Angeles back in like late 90s. And that was one of the first adaptive reuse deals that ever got done in Los Angeles. And I was proud that our firm was very involved in that. So Charles, I think it really depends on the building, the type of commercial building you're talking about, going from traditional commercial to residential.
Right. Then we're seeing trends like neighborhoods like Tenderloin in SF being plagued with homelessness, and people are complaining about it. There's a lot of these neighborhoods in LA as well. Can you tell us what's up with that, and how would you potentially fix it?
Well, okay, so I just want to make sure I understand your question. When you say the Tenderloin district, right? So we don't have that here in Los Angeles, but we do have a very awful homeless problem, and it's a very complicated, very complex problem. And, there's a lot of smart people trying to address it, but it's definitely impacted the real estate. And, I have clients that own commercial buildings and they have a warehouse, or they're importing goods, and it's unfortunate. And there's homeless people lined up in front of their building, and there's nothing as a landlord you could really do about it. And there's nothing the police and that could do about it now. It's a very complex issue. The city is trying to address it. And, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. It's a very sensitive topic, because your heart goes out for people that have to live on the streets. And a lot of these people have severe mental issues. But at the same time, there are businesses that need to be moving forward, and people own real estate that's worth millions and millions of dollars, and they have homeless people living out that's impacting it, and they're setting fires to it. So I don't know what the answer is. We just try to work around it, and we're just supportive of the city doing what they can to help alleviate this problem.
Right.
But it's interesting though. We've seen what is really interesting here about LA in particular is the conversion of old buildings into new buildings. And I'll share one example with you. A client of mine owned an old pickle factory in the northeast part of Los Angeles. And he was an older gentleman, and the business was slowing down. And he has a big land, but a lot of the the warehouse portion, the cold storage portion, the refrigeration portion, it all become old and obsolete. And he was smart enough to acquire a bunch of other little commercial buildings around his manufacturing plant. And when I had approached him and developed the relationship about selling his property, I said, I have good news and bad news. I said, the good news is your property is worth a lot of money. I said, the bad news is it's not going to be a food operation or a pickle facility any longer. He said, Anthony, what do you mean? I said, well, your land is actually worth a lot more than the physical improvements on this property. And nobody today is going to put a new food business in here. What they want to do is they want to build affordable housing. And I said, we have to look at this from a different perspective today. And after a lot of discussions and talks, he came to the realization that I was right. And when we put the property on the market, we market it and approach different affordable housing developers. And I'm happy to say now that there's a beautiful facility built there with different services to care for the community and some of these lower income communities. And I think it's, at the end of the day, it's served the community very well. So it's just interesting to see that, you know, what was a pickle factory for, say, 50 years is now an affordable housing project. So that's a great example where we've really seen the change of use in commercial real estate.
Tell me quickly about your career in real estate and the hustle and the moment you knew you wouldn't struggle financially.
Well, commercial real estate is it's a fun business, and like any business that you want to do well in, it's a difficult business, especially in the early years. So when I got in, there was no salary, there was no draw, it was 100% commission. And I started in this business in my early 30s, and I had been in sales and advertising sales for about 8 years or so prior to that. And so I was used to having a nice base salary and a lot of perks to go with it. And when I made the jump to commercial real estate, I realized it was going to be tough. So the first couple of years were a big struggle. And luckily I had a wife. I was recently married. And so it was good and bad. I had a wife that eventually I had to take care of, but luckily she had a great job when we first got married, and she was, you know, an excellent team player, and realized I wanted to take this career path, and really supported us those first couple of years. First year in brokerage, you know, I barely made $20,000. It was 20 years ago. And then the next year got better. And then the third and fourth year got a lot better. And then after that, it's been wonderful. So it takes 2 years to kind of ramp up, and then another couple of years to really understand it. But and to build up a client base, to build up a name, have a reputation, get deals under your belt, and you never stop, right? This business, you have to constantly keep marketing yourself, branding yourself, talking to people, finding new deals, because there's a lot of things that are out of our control. Even if you did everything right and you have great relationships and you put a deal together, you found a buyer, there's so many things that are out of our control. And so it's important to have a big pipeline and constantly keeping the pipeline full.
What do you do when the commission checks aren't coming in because the market is slower? What happens to your mindset?
What happened with what? My money or my mind? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear
Aren't they the same?
you. Well, money and mind, no. You know, look, you got to have reserves in this business. Every broker goes through tough times. Look, this is my second cycle now where we're kind of getting punched in the face here. I was here during the 08, 09 financial crisis. And luckily I got into the business in 2002. So I had 6 years under my belt, and it was a nice run up until then. And luckily I had a lot of savings. And so, you know, a lot of brokers got out of the business. Others, you know, survived like me, and, you know, we were able to live on our savings. So I've been through it before, and I was able to get some deals together. And then from, I'd say 2010 until just now, you know, it's been a great run. was a very, very long upward trend with commercial real estate. And if you were in business like me for a long time, you made a lot of money and had a lot of fun doing it. And so now again, people start to spend everything they have, but you got to learn to put a lot away for the rainy days. And there will be rainy days in this business. I don't care who you are, how long you've been doing it, how smart you think you are. There are rainy days in commercial real estate. And so we're prepared for that.
And what do you do with your time to maximize your output? Do you invest in real estate until the market becomes better? Do you nurture existing clients' relationship? Do you invest in creating more pipeline? What do you do in these times?
Yeah, I mean, right now it's a tough time to invest. Capital's really, really expensive. And so unless you're really, an all cash buyer, or you're an owner user that needs to buy a facility to operate your business, those are the two main buyers out there today. And I'm working with both. So personally for me, luckily the first half of the year was unfortunately slow. The second half of the year, I've been working on a lot of things that are all now coming to fruition. And so fourth quarter looks like it's going to be a very strong closing for the year. But for me, it's building the pipeline. It's reaching out to old clients. It's working with existing clients and trying to figure out ways to modify or mold deals and figure out why certain properties aren't moving, and what we could do to be creative to get properties leased, to get properties sold, to just find different ways and keep building and building and building. And it's also a good time to kind of, regroup, rethink how I want to approach the business, what things I could be doing differently, what things I could add or take away from my business personally. So that's the silver lining of when, it's a little slower. It gives you a chance to recharge, rethink, and see how I could approach the business in a smarter, different way.
Right. Yeah. What do you have to say on Elon Musk's move to Mexico for his new Giga factory? Do you think a bunch of other manufacturing businesses are gonna do that same move to Mexico instead of China or US?
Well, I would prefer them to stay in the US. And, it's unfortunate. We over 20 years, we lost a lot of manufacturing jobs to overseas, and that really impacted a lot of the apparel business here in Los Angeles. Downtown LA is sort of the epicenter for clothing, and clothing manufacturing and apparel. And we lost a lot of business where the people were, sewing, making garments, designing, manufacturing these. It used to be the center here, and a lot of that just disappeared and it went overseas. So my first choice would be everything to come back to the US. But I get it. I mean, there's cost, and it's, maybe a third of the cost to do things overseas. Mexico, look, I have a client. He has a big factory in Mexico. He closed up his LA location, and he does all his furniture manufacturing down in Mexico. I get it. It's cheaper, and he can save himself a lot of money. But, we want jobs here in the US first and foremost. So that would be my answer to that. Will people follow Musk? Maybe. And depends what type of incentives the government can offer here to keep people here.
What are your top 3 goals for the rest of this year? Only 3-4 months remaining.
Yeah, 3-4 months remaining. So my first goal is to I have about 5 deals in escrow right now. So the number one goal is to get all of those deals closed and to the finish line by the end of the year and cash some big checks. Goal number 2 would be to maintain my health and fitness, both physically, mentally, and emotionally. And that's something that has really kept me on track and on path, despite having a very disruptive year in the market and in real estate. And my third goal would be I have a lot of commitments for charity. And my third goal is to fulfill my charitable commitments by the end of the year.
And your family, because I saw your family man on your Insta.
I am. I love my family. I'm married 21 years and no, 22 years. And I have two beautiful kids. And so, yeah, so family is super, super important to me. My daughter's going to be 18 and will be leaving the house next year. So I really cherish those times that I have with her in the house, because I've just been, hearing all kinds of things. Like when they say the time you spend with your kids up until from like 0 to 18 is probably 90% of the time that you will spend with them. And when you think about that, it has a really big impact on me. So all the little things to me matter a lot. A little dinner here, a lunch there, the hugs before the kids go to bed. And when they go to college, none of that stuff's going to be there anymore. So those little things do go a long way. And I cherish all those moments with my family.
So you're on your deathbed, let's call it 40, 50 years from now. I mean, you can live long in this day and age. Most humans will have an average lifespan of 100. What will you have accomplished at this time around?
What will I have accomplished by the time I'm on my deathbed? Well, I would have accomplished a few things. One is being a husband and a father that is loved and respected and brought very good values and memories to the family. Number two, I have a very big place in my heart for different charities, Jewish charities in the Los Angeles area, and to be known as a philanthropist and supporter of the Los Angeles Jewish Health and other Jewish organizations throughout the community, and to be a respected real estate investor and somebody that has just always spoken the truth, was honest and respectful to everybody he came across.
Wow, I love that. Where can people find out more about you, Anthony?
LinkedIn's a good place to connect with me. I like LinkedIn. It's probably the social that I use the most. I bounce around on Twitter a little bit, but probably LinkedIn is where I tend to post content the most, mostly about real estate and my charity involvement, and then Instagram just a little bit and some personal stuff on there, but not a lot.
And I am Charles Cormier, host of founderwisdompodcast.com. If you want to start scale, be invited to podcast. That is spotbuyer.com. That was Anthony Behar.